We just got ourselves a big update of upcoming changes and improvements coming to Path of Exile in a hopeful patch this week, if not next, with a lot of stuff included. But in my typical fashion of upfronting the knowledge of my video and getting the dog hair off my beard, let me tell you what is going to be happening here today. So first off, we're going to get a massive improvement to respecking. It's going to be 40 to 50% cheaper in the start and middle of endgame. So that should be on a cascading scale. So it should be cheaper prior to that, but it will be cheaper after. Also be able to teleport to checkpoints within a zone after this patch launches. There was not necessarily a nerf, but they made it so the first trial of Ascendancy, the trial of Secumus, is a lot easier to deal with now, with a lot of bugs being fixed there. There was a nerf to the Skeletal Arsonist, to Vine Arrow, to Tornado, and to Something Salvo, one of the crossbow skills. But on that same note, there was a buff to a substantial amount of skills that are underperforming. Namely, of course, the shield skills for mace, the quarterstaff skills that are underperforming, some crossbow skills that are underperforming, overall chaos damage over time. So a lot of buffs to things that kind of made it so that it shoehorned you into set builds. So all those things are coming in this patch that hopefully lands this week. This information is all a day old. So if you've watched this from other content creators or if you've watched it yourself, you're not going to find anything new in this video. So please feel free to go ahead and shut the video down if you so wish. But before you head out, if you find this video helpful, please don't forget to like, comment, or subscribe. Each one of those things does help me out in a huge way. Also, I am currently live streaming, so you can head on over to my Twitch and follow me on Twitch if you want to watch me stream. I do it every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. Well, let's get started here on all of the big improvements and changes that are coming, namely to Melee in Path of Exile 2. So going through a lot of the big changes that are coming here. First off, like we mentioned last week, we'll be adding the capacity to fast travel between checkpoints within an area, as well as adding many more checkpoints to areas, generally at all entrances and exits to areas, meaning if you find these first, you'll be able to instantly travel to them to continue with one of the longest run-on sentences I've read in a long time. But this will be great because if you've been playing the game and you jump through some of the zones, you'll notice they are massive zones, right? And being able to teleport in between those checkpoints is a huge benefit because I almost pulled the XLR cable out of this microphone. But outside of that, that's going to allow us to just really easily move through our maps. In addition to, we'll be a nice buff here to our passive point respecking system. So it's a pretty aggressive curve that they were saying, getting more expensive with character level. But as we flatten that curve, it doesn't exponentially grow as much. So this should generally result in approximately 40 to 50% less gold cost for respecking between the start and middle of endgame progression. Now, since it's a curve, that will flatten across the board, right? So whatever you're experiencing now, maybe you're level 20, maybe you're level 30, and it is expensive to respec, that will become cheaper. So if you want to play around with some skills, you're about to do it, maybe you're reading this or watching this video at work right now, then you're going to want to do that after this patch launches, especially if you're a higher level. And I've got a whole link to this below, so if you want to read this rather than listen to me, you definitely can do that. Now, for the first trial of Ascendancy, the trial of Secumus, I don't know, she just said it in the campaign, I forgot what she said. But players were finding that the trial was particularly frustrating in close range. Personally, I play a warrior. My main character is a warrior warbringer. So a lot of this patch is going to make melee a lot more viable. And I cannot be more excited because I'm hitting a point with my warrior where hitting these trials becomes so much more difficult because of the way the trial actually interacts with your functionality as a warrior and having your functionality be so neutered across a lot of the lackluster mace or shield skills. So with the trial, what they were finding is that there was a big bug that was causing you to take too much damage from damage over time effects. So anytime you get hit by a fire trap, it does any kind of ignite on you, you're now taking way more damage than was originally intended. In fact, it was thrice damage, which we'll get to in just a little bit. So as you can see here, honor damage now scales down based on your distance to enemies. When in close range, you'll take 35% less honor damage, tapering off as you are further away from monsters. This is huge. So basically, being in close combat, doing melee damage, you have 35% damage, honor damage reduction, is if you want to think of it that way. So you're just taking less just by the virtue of being up and close and personal. And then fixed a bug where the damage over time was dealing thrice as much damage. Artist in the Ambulance is one of my favorite albums by Thrice, but now you're not going to be taking that damage that damage against your honor, which is nice. And also fixed a bug where honor resistance was only applying to 2/3 of that damage. So that's going to be a lot better for any and all people playing, regardless if you're melee or not. Serpent Clan's burrow and ambush attacks now have improved visual telegraphing, cannot be used from as far away. So now you can see when that happens, because that was really frustrating. Seeing the Serpent Clans, you're like, oh, just get away from them quickly because they're going to mess me up. They're going to burrow and just destroy my world. That's been fixed. Volcanoes created by Rattle Cage's Fissure Slam now last half the duration. So again, if you're a warrior and you're jumping into that first ascendancy, the biggest issue was dealing with the tick damage, the chipping damage, as it often is called, from those volcanoes. Now that's not going to be as big of an issue, so I'm really excited to see that. Also with the set, I would love to see a pass happen on the second set of trials. Not even so much to reduce things, but better visuals. Like I find that a lot of the Trial of Chaos, dealing with any of the telegraphs on the floor, I can barely see them. Like the one for the lightning one, it has a real faint outline. And so I'd like to see a lot of those improvements made for other trials and getting improved visuals. So at least I can just be better at avoiding the things I need to avoid that I can just barely see to begin with. So into endgame and monster balance here. I personally am not into the extreme portions of the end game, so this will probably benefit a lot of you that understand this better, but I'm going to go through what I think is probably the best stuff. Maps no longer have additional elemental resistance penalties inherently applied at tier 6 and tier 11 or higher maps. I think it's between tier 6 and tier 11. I'm not sure. By the way, it is now consistent across all the end game. Chaos damage now also scales less aggressively over the end game. Crit strikes from monsters now deal 40% less damage. I would imagine those are the three big things. Also, and I'm not sure if this is something exclusive to end game mapping from the Atlas map or if it's exclusive to the whole entire game, but the Siphon Flask charges modifier on monsters now drains 10 times less flask charges per second. This was unintentionally draining away way too many charges. So my experience in it outside of the end game is that this is a tyrannical thing to deal with, because as soon as they come and range you, you're like, and you're just gone, either with your mana, if you have the mana draining one, or with your flask, it just goes down immediately. So I'm hoping this is across the board. If not, it's just something I'll deal with, and I'll see it having be better impacted in the end game. I got dog hair everywhere because I have a mini Australian Shepherd that just sheds like no one's business. But now we're onto the character and item balance here. So we've made charm modifiers on belts substantially more common, because that isn't the case right now. So now the symbolism, if you don't know this, for those of you that are veterans, you definitely know that this exists. But you'll see of symbolism and of inscription. Then any of you coming from Diablo, you're familiar with your affixes, your prefixes, and your suffixes, right? So those still exist in this game. If you hold down Alt when you look at a weapon, it shows you what affix it is, either if it's a prefix or a suffix, and its tier. I don't know what it is on console, I apologize. But by doing that, you can see that of symbolism and of inscription are affixes that are applied to things. And they're saying that they're increasing the chance of these modifiers happening, 23 and onward for symbolism and 64 and onward for inscription. So we should get better charm modifiers going forward. You can't see these as well. This is green, this is red, this is green, this is red, but the red are nerfs, greens are buff. So Electrocute is now 25% harder to build up. But the damage penalty has been removed from the support gem. So this should overall balance out, but it is worth noting. Added a new lightning damage and electrocute cluster to the passive tree in between ranger and monks. Right now in this stream, I'm streaming my new Sub-Zero monk lightning, cold lightning build. And what I was saying is, you know, there's not really a ton of cold passives that match the amount of cold skills, but there's a ton of lightning passives. But they're kind of a little bit more north, or they're further down into the tree. This is cool to be able to leverage those lightning and electrocute clusters earlier in the passive tree for the ranger and the monk. And I'm saying monk, but ranger also has tons of lightning capabilities. So it's nice that they have this lightning cluster to take advantage of earlier that they didn't have otherwise. On that same note, though, of my Sub-Zero build that I'm making, it is now more difficult to chain freeze enemies by reducing the amount of freeze buildup applied after a freeze has been applied. So even though that has a double applied there, I think there's trying to say that it has diminishing returns on stacking freeze up on things. My Ice Monk is just disgusting. So this is probably something to bring ice more in line with the other elements. Right now, it feels like there's no reason really to use fire as much as it is to use ice or lightning. Even looking at the heralds of Herald of Ice, Ash, and Lightning, The Herald of Ash is not fun, not great compared to the other two Heralds. Albeit the Herald of Ash is keyed around a melee character that's built on doing overkill damage, but regardless, my point remains that the Herald of Ice is sweet. This should helpfully kind of bring things into somewhat of a equal playing field. The Hunter's Talisman notable now grants +1 charm slot as well. For those that were using it, it is now better. Now for skill and support gem balance, they did talk about moving things down that were overpowered, right? They're saying like, we don't want to do it, but there are some things that were far too overpowered. How we define overpowered, basically, it's a situation in which a certain skill is so powerful that players feel no other method of playing the game is viable. Sidebar, what I will say is the problem with this is a lot of people's consumption of what a thing is viable in a game is based off of content creators or off of gaming publication. So this becomes a skewed, warped perspective because oftentimes content creators only make content on something that is so disgustingly overpowered that it's only an S tier build, quote unquote. They're not going to make the B tier build video because they want the clicks, right? So what I think happens is you have an echo chamber that exists of content creation, of media creation, of Reddit posts that will mirror a specific build that only becomes the one that people want to touch and play with without experimenting beyond that. So I think that it's like there's a double-edged sword to a lot of this. Like, they want to make it so that other builds are truly viable. But I think it's also kind of the issue is that you look at some of these builds, you're like, oh, this is the only one that's viable because it's the only one that's being put in front of you. So oftentimes you'll find that some builds are a little more viable once you really explore the passive tree and really fine tune it. So if you're struggling with your build, I would say look more at your passive tree because I'm doing the same because my build sucks right now on my warrior, but that's not here or there. Generally speaking, we are trying to do this in a way that doesn't make a build bad, but we can make mistakes. Ideally, any true meta shifting changes will only happen at the same time as a content patch with a new league to play. And this is talking about the future, right? They're saying they're going to shift the meta with the meta shifting things of new content drops. That doesn't mean we have to look at underpowered skills and support gems. We've got a number of changes planned that will help. So Rolling Slam, if you've played with that, it's not amazing, but it's a good holdover until you get Leap Slam. Personally, I was using that in my build, and I liked it. You have to think of it as an initiator. As you charge into a pack of monsters, press Rolling Slam, your character will then slam into the monsters coming your way. But all shield skills and Rolling Slam are getting improvements in the mace section. Various bow skills, especially the skills used to generate frenzy charges, which is good because there's so many frenzy charged mechanics that you really aren't leveraging a ton as a ranger. Bone spells and chaos damage over time spells in the occult section. Crossbow skills, especially those at higher tiers, and some of the underachieving quarterstaff abilities. And I'm not sure which one these are really talking about. I don't know if it's the non-elemental ones. Tempest Bell isn't technically an elemental one, but it really is, and it's badass. But maybe it's some of those. Not really sure. So we'll have to see what this is in the full patch notes. Alongside all these skills, though, we've done a pass over on the support gems. We've added 2 new support gems, and they fixed some of the ones with the fire, lightning, and cold exposure, not exposure. The tremor support gem here is going to give multiple aftershocks to skills, and I'm stoked on this because I use a lot of aftershock and jagged ground in my build right now, so I'm excited to play around with this. The biting support gem you can now use to give more damage to the command skills of supported minions, and then the fire, lightning, and cold exposure support gems no longer penalize damage of supported skills. They now have a mana cost multiplier though of 120%, so I'm excited to see what that does. And lastly, we have some overachieving skills that are getting a little bit of a nerf. So Skeletal Arsonist, I don't know why I popped into Sean Connery if that Skeletal Arsonist Spirit costs now match the other 2 skeletal mages. This should result in a slight decrease in the number of arsonists at a higher level. A nerf to the damage over time component on very high level of Tornado and Vine Arrow. These were never intended to be dealing damage themselves, but more so act as a way of other skills to propagate damage. And then lastly, Magnetic Salvo can now only use your stuck lightning arrows as opposed to those created by your party members. But those are all of our patch notes. Well, most of the condensed version of our patch notes, where we have, as I said, the full patch notes are coming soon, but check some of the more significant changes below. And they've said last week that there is a patch coming this week that will include the checkpoints thing. So Hopefully this happens in the next day or two. By the time this video goes live, it did not go, the patch did not come out. So hopefully it'll come out within the next day or two. Like I said, hopefully definitely before Christmas. But I think this is a huge patch because it hits a lot of the biggest pain points right now. Crashing to desktop is one that I didn't mention in here, so hopefully that's kind of fixed in whatever way, shape, or form. But the respec was one of the biggest things I've seen commented about in a lot of my videos. Like, hey, game's great right now, but I feel if I screw up, I'm penalized on respecing, which is supposed to be an accessible system. So I'm excited to see what that 40 to 50% less gold cost looks like. Also, too, the Ascendancy trial was a big hang up. That's when I had my first taste of, maybe I shouldn't be playing a warrior. Maybe this is going to be a little rough. And in addition to that too, it's nice to see that melee is getting some love, to feel like maybe a more viable option, in the sense that it is viable. But every time I go into a new map on my warrior, on my warbringer, I know I'm playing warbringer and that's not nearly as high tuned as a Titan. I'm trying to make warbringer work. And I get great wave clear. It's single target damage that I suffer from. So hopefully this tweaking to some of the mace skills and the shield skills should help out. And in addition to that too, like I was saying, when I go into a new map, I feel like I have to retool something. I have to get the highest DPS weapon at all times. I feel like I have to always tap into it. Versus my monk, my cold monk, I'm just blitzing through stuff. And yeah, well, I got snagged up a little bit here. I'll just swap out my weapon. Cool, good to go. I don't have to constantly look at my passives, swap different support gems into my skills, trying to adapt things as best I can to every location. And it does also, taking into consideration too this, the game has 3 acts, and then you're going to repeat those acts on cruel difficulty. So if you think about that, a third of those acts, which is just Act 2, is highly resistant to both physical damage and fire. So it makes it really a struggle because those are the 2 things that the warrior taps into the most. Tons of fire nodes, tons of physical damage, lots of aftershock and all that does physical damage. So 2/3 of the game, until you get into your actual end game, 1/3 of the game is stacked against you. So I'm excited to see how this actually feels and how melee can kind of come to life a little bit of a better way. But go ahead and let me know in the comment section below. What are you excited about? Or do you think this is going to be a great improvement for the game in the right direction? Are you really bummed about what they're going to be doing to chain freezing and to electrocute? Are you really not stoked about any of these nerfs? Are you stoked about some of the buffs? Whatever it is, go ahead and let me know in the comment section below. But as always, guys, thank you so much for watching here today. Have a good one. Take care.